Hello and welcome to Nutrition and Alternative Medicine. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. I do appreciate my love language is quality time, one of them. And when you download it and listen, it does mean a lot to me, and I hope it makes a difference in your life. That is why I'm doing this show. This is the last week for the early bird special for the next big step. It will not be cheaper than it is this week, and it will not be easier on your pocketbook than it is this week, ending on March 30th or 31st, because I have created a 5-pay plan for you in order to give you time to commit to the event and to pay for it more easily. Now, for some of you, because I know people from the last event who want to come to the next event but are unwilling to make a decision about something so far in the future. You know, some of you are very structured and planned and are way ahead of the game, and I've got people signing up for January already for next year. And some of you know that maybe something, you're just waiting to see what's going to happen. So you're unwilling to make a commitment this far in advance. So here's what I'm going to offer to you only, those of you that listen to my show. While there aren't refunds when we get close to the event, let's say 30 days out, there aren't any refunds. If you buy a ticket and know and decide by the end of July or the first week in August that you can't come, but you want to come to January's event, I will move your ticket from September to January. So I know that might be even further out for you, but possibly January of next year is more feasible to plan, potentially, depending on family vacations or whatever's going on. So in case, just to put your mind at rest, if you know you want to be at an event, the lowest price literally will be this week. Otherwise it goes up. Again, check out jjflazanes.com/next big step, or actually just come to jjflazanes.com. I now have an event page. So at the top on the navigation bar, you'll see events, and just click on events and check it out. So just one more quick thing about these events, because when the next big step happens, what I would like to see happen is that I repeat both of these events ongoing. Releasing what weighs you down in January is appropriate because I feel like coming into a new year, we need to unload any of the habits and patterns that we have in our lives that stop us from making real change. So releasing what weighs you down feels like almost like a detox at the beginning of the year to make sure that we are clean and we're purified and we're ready for something new. The next big step is a different energy. The next big step is actually about moving forward and breaking through any of those limitations that stop you from going to the next level. Because the next level is something unknown to you. And in order to get to someplace unknown, we have to do things we've never done before. So the next big step is going to focus on that. And today's show with Melanie Benson is all about uncovering those 3 money barriers that stop all of us, whether you have a regular job or career and work for somebody else, or you work for yourself. It doesn't matter, because these 3 principles can be applied to every single person. Because even if you work for somebody else in a career, there's always ways to make more money, to earn more money, whether it be something on the side, whether it be getting a raise, there are many ways for you to manifest different forms of financial abundance, but these 3 unconscious money barriers can get in the way. Melanie will be at the event, which you'll hear us talk about over and over again, and she will be doing 2 parts. So this will not be the only show that we do. Melanie will also be doing a show that's more practical, but we've got so much content, and I know you're going to enjoy today's show. Melanie Benson is a Profit Amplifier and has a gift for guiding fast-paced, mission-driven people to accelerate results. Melanie's superpower is uncovering what derails you from productivity and progress, ultimately freeing you to amplify your influence and income without overwhelm. Melanie is the host of the Amplify Your Success podcast on iTunes, author of Rewired for Wealth, founder of MoneyDNA, co-author of Entrepreneur.com's startup guide to starting an information marketing business, and her success tips featured in magazines such as American Express, Open Forum, Bloomberg BusinessWeek, Women's Day, Parenting Magazine, and University of Phoenix Alumni Magazine. She's on the executive team for the Women's Speakers Association, as well as the council chair for the Association of Transformational Leaders. Welcome to the show, Melanie.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to have you at the event in September. Melanie will be presenting at the Next Big Step and sharing some of the things that we're going to talk about today, because I think it's really important for all of my communities across the board, no matter what show you listen to this on. Everyone has to deal with money, and it's the one thing that I haven't dealt with because I'm not the expert in it. And I'm so happy to finally feel confident about bringing somebody else on who I trust embodies that whole mind, body, soul approach to life, basically, and who is an expert in the money category. So, Melanie, I'm just really excited to start not only this conversation, but every other conversation we're going to have from now until hopefully next January, if you can come to that one too, to get people, all people. I know you specialize in working with entrepreneurs and business owners, but I really think that the message that you have talked about on your podcast, the things I've heard you lecture about and speak about, are applicable to everybody. And it's not just everybody could break out of their shell of money constraints and learn how to think like a more high level earner and to expand the possibilities of what's in store for their future and not be so limited. So thank you again for agreeing to play with me.
You're welcome. It's one of my favorite subjects. It's one I wish I would have heard a podcast episode like this when I was in my 20s that could have changed the trajectory of my success much earlier.
But so perfect, though, that now you get to impart that wisdom on other people earlier on. And right. So it's really makes you more passionate, because it's like, why do people need to struggle when here are the answers? And so I'm happy to have you really be the first person. There have been people who've been on the show, they've been on the Fit to Love podcast, who've talked a little bit about money, but not in the way that we're going to approach it both here and live at the event. So let's start out with some. I know one of the big things that you like to lead with are sort of like the 7 ways to think like a higher earner, or the 3 things that stop people. What do you think is the most important idea that across the board, from entrepreneurs to the person with a job, needs to overcome or understand or have clarity over when it comes to their mental and emotional and even spiritual relationship with money?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, and I think we might want to start with what gets in the way, because I think if we understand what gets in the way, what we do differently is so much more important, right? Like if we can see where we're blocking. And I just want to put out there that my belief and my experience about prosperity and financial abundance and business success, the whole gamut, starts with the premise that money is energy. That our basically everything in life is energy. Like I don't think there's anything that's not energy, but when we start to understand that our relationship with money at the crux of it is energy, it can change the way we look at things. It can change the way we focus on creating more of it. And oftentimes what we're doing is we're getting stuck around money, we're getting stuck around business or success or our career path simply because our energy is not flowing in that area. And so I think starting with that premise and understanding that a big way to shift the relationship we have with money and the amount of money we have is to recognize that we can actually impact it by changing our energy, which is something all of us can control. Because it's very easy to get caught up in, well, I don't have control because I have a job and I can't determine how I get paid, or, so-and-so gets money for me and I can't control. Really, it is in our control when we start to recognize we control our own energy. So I just wanted to start with that and give everybody this big dose of empowerment to recognize that, wow, we have so much more control over our life than we oftentimes give ourselves credit for.
I think that's perfect. And it is, when you can simplify sort of some of the things that are in the way, removing them, like you said, makes things a lot easier about what you're going to do differently.
Yeah. And so you're right. I do tend to work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but I am a former employee. So, I understand the dance between the two worlds. I worked for corporations for 15 years and before I started my own business. And so one of the things that I think is really, really important to understand about money and what gets in the way of money, like what gets us trapped, is fear. Now, it's funny when I bring this up, especially if I'm doing a live event. I can't wait to hear the audience at your event in September hear what really fear is about. Because sometimes we think fear, okay, false evidence appearing real. We've all heard the acronyms. We know fear is something we need to probably avoid and something there. But what I have learned that fear is, especially around money, is fear is oftentimes disguised as logic. And one of the ways we trap ourselves around our financial abundance and prosperity, and actually, JJ, we could make this about anything we want. We could make this about relationships. We could make this about our health. We can make it about our weight. We can make it about any single part of our life. And that is fear is often disguised as logic. And logic is that part of us that kicks in when we're trying to do something we've never done before, or when we're reaching for something that's outside of our comfort zone, or it's going to require us to transform or change or adapt in some way. Logic kicks in of all the reasons why it logically and rationally can't or won't work. And it's interesting because it's actually a way we keep ourselves safe. And safety is something as human beings, of course, we want to be safe. We want to feel like everything's going to be okay. But sometimes when we're going for something new, we're trying to call in a new level of abundance, we're doing deeper work, we're clearing out blocks, we might feel as we start to do new things and new habits, these old patterns of, the old mantras that people fed to us, old, rational ways of thinking come up and say, you can't do that. That won't work for you. And so I think it's really important to understand the role fear plays. Fear is actually information. So when you're reaching for something new, when you're wanting to create more abundance and you want to, experience, like maybe you're thinking you don't want a job anymore and you want to go out and create your own business, you want to work for yourself, but there's this fear that gets in the way. One of the things to realize is, what's the fear really about? And to recognize that fear is just information. It's not knowing how, which is where that lovely logic mind comes in, or it's not feeling like you're capable. It's feeling like there's something missing in the information piece. Now, sometimes fear is that's not your path, and it feels like fear because you freeze up and you constrict. And so one of the biggest things I like to teach my clients and anybody really who's wanting to create more abundance is to recognize the difference between constriction, which is, okay, there's something not right about this. It's constricting me. It's feeling very heavy. And okay, I just don't know how to do it. And I need more information in order to feel like I can take action. So that's a big distinction in that place. So that's my take on fear and how it plays into and becomes a block for many of us as we reach for new heights and want to create new levels of financial well-being.
What I love is how you said fear is logic. And what is really fascinating to me, and you may not know the answer to this question, that's totally okay. I know you're a Taurus. And for me, Tauruses are all about financial stability as
Yep.
well as security and that whole like feeling safe. So it's very interesting to me. All the things that you talked about, I kept thinking, but she's a Taurus, but she's a Taurus. So do you know anything? Do you know what your moon is?
I do not, but I'm also on the cusp between Taurus and Gemini.
Okay.
So, the Geminis oftentimes are about duality. And so, interestingly enough, I have a duality of achieving new heights with a deep need to be grounded and feel safe.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, for me, and if you follow the Enneagram styles at all, I'm a one, which is all about getting it right. So I got a lot of factors working against me here. So yes,
Well, I
it
think
is
that's
very true.
fascinating. And people that came to releasing what weighs you down in January, we talked a lot about astrology, and I was weaving it into, again, some of these personality choices because sometimes people can see within their Enneagram or in their astrology chart why they gravitate towards reacting in a certain way and how, and then it's not about rejecting that, it's about working with it and embracing it. And then how do you do that? So what would be really fun is to also go a little bit deeper, which I know we will, whether it be today, next show, or in September live at the event, is, how some of the ways when you are someone who needs to get it right and needs that grounding and stability, do you overcome that fear? And I extra love the constriction versus the how at the event in January. And it's funny because, I'll tell you the story when I see you soon in person. And I'm not going to make an announcement about this yet, but I'm going to wet everyone's whistle with the little teaser here. There was a product that I was all about. I was like all in the rage about. And push comes to shove, their customer service isn't so good, and it's always on back order, and now it's not even available. And I made a comment at the event that, I'm just going to make it myself. And I said it flippantly in the moment at the event. And about a week later, I was taking my catwalk, which is one of my exercise walks where there's lots of cats that I give treats to or pet and feed and say hello to. So I call it a cat walk. I'm taking my cat walk, and before I reached any of those felines, the thought came across my head that I went, oh, I wasn't kidding. I'm going to make this product. And it wasn't fear that came over me. It was, I don't know how. While I noticed that there's a little constriction in the fear, it was just a little bit. Like it felt right. But then the next thought gave me the fear of, but I don't know how. I've never done it. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to raise the money. I don't know how much money I need, blah, 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 blah. So it's really hitting home because I could tell I was in alignment with myself. So I knew that when I felt it was the right choice. But then the next thing that happens is that fear starts to set in. And I know for a lot of people that fear stops them from going anywhere else. And so to be able to differentiate whether or not it's just because you don't know how, because you can always learn, or if it's something different is, I think, very helpful. So hopefully everybody can start to assess what is this fear really about? And can I learn this? Because guess what? Everyone that did anything new ever had to learn it. And we all have fear about that. So great first start, fear and logic. I mean, obviously fear, like we all get, yeah, fear, of course, fear, but fear as logic and fear as rationalization. And I think that's super important.
Yeah. And you know what? It's interesting that you bring up, first of all, I just need to say, when you said catwalk, I thought you meant you were taking your cat for a walk. So I just had to put that out there.
I would take Luna for a walk if she'd wear the darn harness. She could totally take a walk, but she won't wear the thing.
Yes, I have seen somebody take their cat for a walk. So anyway, that was my visual. But it's interesting that you bring up this big thing that you've never done before, because what happens is the bigger your idea, and the more outside the box of anything you've ever done it is, the more logic will kick in with all the things you don't know how, all the reasons why it won't work. So it's almost like you're playing big and you're really reaching outside your comfort zone and you really are evolving if your fear is great. And I look at it as a measure of how much tension we're creating between the old us and the new us, the old ideas and the new ideas. It's just tension. It's an energy to recognize. And by the way, the solution that I love so much, and I ran the Own Your Bold Challenge this year. I'll run another one later this year. The solution that comes up for that fear is to make a decision and to just decide what is the outcome I'm committed to, and let go of needing to know all the how pieces so that you can just focus on, all right, if this is my outcome, this is what I'm committed to, and this is the most important thing to me right now, I have to release how I get there and just trust that every step I take will reveal another step. And that could be hiring a mentor. It could be joining a program. It could be taking a course, right? There's a lot of ways to get there, but you have to just make that decision, and it starts to recalibrate all that energy that comes up.
Love it. Yes. And yes. Yep.
Check.
And after I made that decision.
So let's talk about another block.
Yes, please. What's number 2?
It's conflict. So here's how it plays out. There oftentimes is this deep internal conflict between what I think I want and what I believe I have to give up to get there. So let me give you an example of how this has played out for a lot of the people I've worked with over the years. And that is, I want more success, but I don't want to have to work more to get there. And I'm afraid I'll have to give up my personal freedom, or I'll damage a relationship, or, we can come up with 17 things that would come up in the, I will have to give this up. Conflict is a sign that something you desire is in conflict with something you value. And it doesn't mean it's real. It just means that based on the way you're looking at the situation, based on how you know in your logic mind how to get to the goal, you have put a constraint on how you get there because you've never done it a different way. Like your mind hasn't imagined how to get there in a new way. So what I like to do is break down those conflicts and those constraints and create what I call new paradigms, new possibilities. So let's say someone's goal, actually I'll take a client that I worked with at one time. I had a client who was in the mortgage world, and he wanted to up-level his visibility. He wanted to really position himself more as a leader in his industry. And the way he wanted to do that was to speak more. But in his mind, if he was going to speak more, that meant he would lose time at home. So we basically said we got to shatter this box that you're putting this goal in. Like the box right now says I lose something important. I might lose my family, or I might lose time with my family, or my wife might decide to divorce me if I go after this goal. And so by shattering the box called I have to be out on the road, what ended up emerging for him is he realized he could create a local TV show. And so he launched his TV show as a way of getting that speaking out there and raising his profile in the community, which is what he really wanted. He wanted to be in front of new clients. So there are ways all the time that we put these boxes around what we think we can have, and that creates that conflict. So a really easy way to shift that one is if you notice something that you want is in conflict with something you value, and it could be that you want more money, but the way to get there is holding you back. You're like, I don't want to give this up. Then you have to decide there's nothing to give up. You have to shift to and. How do I have this and that? So how do I have more money and enough time for my relationships? How do I have more, success and continue to have time for my daily workout, right? Like whatever those things you put at odds, instead of looking at them, it's this or that, it's how do I have both? And it may not come to you right away, but I guarantee you, if you sit with it and you be with it and you focus on it and you're committed to that goal, the and will reveal itself. It happens every time.
That's actually my whole story of how I started my business, because I had this great personal training resume. I was director of education for New York Sports Club basically when I was 21 years old. I had a resume from a lot of different certifications and educators that was really good. And at the same time, I was also acting, and I had this amazing, I was at Carnegie Mellon, I went to NYU and Syracuse University. I had amazing teachers in film and television as well as theater and musical theater, and very known people at the time. And here I'm looking at these two resumes thinking, how can I make my life work for me? Because half of me wants to do this and half of me wants to do this, and I really want to do both. And then I went to bed one night and had a dream and woke up and boom, it was like, work for yourself. Open a personal training company. That there was one in New York, and I decided to call and say, hey, I want to open one in California. And that would give me the flexibility to do both, because I thought if I'm going to market myself as one thing and spend time trying to find out how to do that, I'm going to market myself for both things. So that's exactly kind of my whole story, which is really interesting. And I also was thinking, as you were telling that story, a lot of therapists will also, like, anytime you want to say but, you replace it with and. so instead of saying but, which negates everything you said before, you say and to include. It's much more inclusive. So that's a really powerful, simple technique, using and to help satisfy conflict.
The minute you speak words and start to put ideas out there, it's like we're telling our most resourceful part of our mind. There's a center in the brain that follows directions. I call it the directive. And we're giving it directives all the time. And so when we put, okay, if I have this, I have to give this up. And if that's really what our directive is being fed, we literally manifest that. So the fastest way to dissolve those blocks is to say, okay, I'm going to shoot for this goal, and I'm always going to have plenty of time for blah, blah, blah. So it's very powerful. And again, it doesn't always mean you have the answer as quickly as you did in your dream, which I love, but sometimes it is that easy and it is that fast. And you just have to be open to seeing that new possibility as it drops in.
Well, it's habitual, right? People tend to sort of have that habitual way of thinking about things, or default practices and sort of limiting beliefs and scarcity that runs both in our lineage as well as in the environment. And when you introduce something new like this, you can quickly probably make some big transformations when you start applying it to some of those old belief patterns. And then once they start to see that and make those changes and start to expand, then it probably gets a little bit easier to continue using it, right? Because they didn't know how to do it before. And then it's just as simple as teaching someone a different way to think. And all of a sudden they're like, wow, I can, like you said, I can apply this to everything.
True. And you just brought up a really good point, this whole idea of limitations, because that's actually the third block. And it's interesting because many of us have created a story of limitation that we live in every single day. And So I like to look at like the stories that we create. I many years ago when I was first starting my business, I went to this seminar and there was a guy talking about how our stories are all made up. Like every single thing we tell ourselves that we tell somebody in our lives, it's like our version of it, right? It's like the way we remember it. So it's a story that's made up. And so if you're going to make up stories, you might as well make up a good story. You might as well make up one that supports you. And that's the way I look at limitations. So limitations are basically our limiting beliefs and the ideas that we hold about any subject. We're going to talk about money here, but it could be about relationships. It could be about our body. It can be about, your energy, anything. It is your version of the truth. And so when I look at what's standing in the way between someone I'm coaching and mentoring and their ideal outcome, I often find that they have made up a story full of rationalizations and logical reasons of why they are trapped exactly where they are right now. And what I know is that it's a story, and that story becomes permanent because we tell ourselves the story, then we run around and tell everybody else the story, and then we've actually run around and collect evidence to reinforce our story because we set ourselves up in these situations that match our belief of what we believe we are capable of and we deserve. So limitation stories, the way to know if you're living in a limitation story is if you actually explain to yourself, your spouse or a friend or a client over and over and over throughout a week why you have what you have and it's not what you want, you are absolutely living in a limitation story, even if it's absolutely real and you can't see any other way to get there. Because I want to acknowledge there are things that happen and we get in situations that are very real and we can feel very trapped and we can feel very victimized there. And it is real. And it's not that it's not, but we're also seeing that situation through a lens called this is a problem instead of this is an opportunity, and it keeps us trapped there.
Yeah, it's also a frequency, and we're going to talk about that in September more than we did in January in terms of law of attraction, because it's like I liken to compare it to being in a building with 30 floors. If you're on the second floor, you can't see, hear, nor experience what's happening on the 10th floor. And so frequency is the same. When there's a story that's keeping you sort of in a lower frequency, you are not able to attract and be in alignment with that's a little higher than where you are. And so using the conflict and the fear and being able to acknowledge that what you're going through is real, but then transform it and learn how to tell a different story, which puts you in a different frequency, which helps you to attract better things, right? Is an energetic way to actually shift what is still real, but now new and better and different.
Totally. I love the story, the metaphor of what floor of the building you're in. That's a great metaphor for vibration. I like to think of it like a radio channel, like you're tuning into a channel. And, again, if everything's energy and you're tuning your vibration into, channel broke, then you're going to only hear what's on that station. You're only going to attract people into your life that, share the messages on that station. But if you do the work to upgrade your vibration and tune into a new channel, it's really amazing how you start to attract more people that are actually on that channel. So that vibration and frequency piece is very key to shifting what you're attracting and what you're able to create in your life.
Absolutely. And there are different, I started using the building because I also like to use the radio dial channel as well, but it gave multiple frequency images in one hit, right? So if you can imagine,
totally.
because I've actually experienced, not that everyone hasn't, but I remember the first time I experienced actually with a person watching a situation, being involved in a situation, and have us interpret it completely different, and thinking to myself, oh my God, this is frequency at work right here. We are on two different channels, because I don't doubt that what that person is saying happened. I just wasn't clicked into it, so I didn't receive it. I didn't see it. I didn't experience it because I wasn't on that channel. And so the whole building image, I want to use the building image to help people understand that you can be in a room full of 30 people and you're all on different floors. So know that just because you think you're in the same room doesn't mean you're on the same frequency.
Love it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks. So now I know we have so much more to continue talking about, and I want to give people the flip side of being able to increase that, and I do want to do that, but I don't know that we have the time on the first show to get that all done. So I want to leave it up to you and say, what do you think we can do with this fear, the conflict, and the limitations in terms of now that we know what the problem is, what are one, two, or three things that we can, after removing them or working with them, can we do to increase, again, that frequency or that change the story, remove the conflict, get rid of the logic?
Yeah. So one of the first things that we do is we have to learn to think differently. And so I don't mean just to say affirmations and come up with some mantras. I literally mean we have to train ourselves to think in a whole new way. And so I actually study high achievers. I actually studied people who are wildly prosperous and always seem to like touch something and it turned to gold. And I was really, really curious because I did grow up in poverty. Like we did not grow up with a lot of money. Things were very challenging in my home around money. And so as I came into running my own business, I found money was a struggle. Like I was pretty much unconsciously rejecting it at every potential possibility. I made up stories about selling and marketing, like, nobody wants to be, doing selling and marketing. If I build something, they'll just show up, right? I had so many bad ideas about having my own business. And so what I had to really look at is I had to train myself to think in a whole new way. And what I found is, and I actually did a podcast episode on this, people actually have very different thought patterns who attract wealth and who create consistent wealth. And one of them is, one of the different ways they think is literally they take risks very differently than people who have no money. So people who are wealthy tend to make calculated risks and they're not afraid to do something they've never done before. But what happens for people who financially struggle all the time is they tend to either not take the risk and all the logic of why it will never work and it's a bad idea will overtake them and hold them back. Or they take no calculation in their risk and they throw money at stuff over and over and over again. So the unique difference in people who think really strategically about growing wealth is they take very calculated risks. They know what they can afford to risk, and they're willing to stretch outside their comfort zone to do something they've never done before. So they literally invest today in future success tomorrow. And so I call it investment mindset. So if they're investing in a mentor, they're investing in, team, they're investing in, future wealth building tools, they're investing in a home, right? Whatever it is, they're making a decision and they're willing to risk money today for future success. And they know what that range is between I'm willing to risk this and this is dangerous, like this is stupid money I'm throwing away. So they're very clear what that calculation is for them. And it's different for everybody. Everybody has risk tolerance that's unique to them. But the big difference that I want to impart is how so many people who don't have money in the bank right now hold themselves back because they're like, if I can't see it, I won't do it, right? And so they don't get strategic. They just literally like, okay, I don't have any money, so I can't do anything different. And that is the definition of what keeps you in struggle. So that's one of them. A couple other ones I found, it kind of tying into our conversation earlier, that high achievers by nature have no idea how to do anything they do. They do not know how to achieve the goal they set, but they set goals because they are in alignment with where they want to be a year, 5 years down the road. And then they're all in. So they get resourceful, they ask for help, they learn and grow from others, but they don't let not knowing how determine what goals they will set and achieve. That was a huge one for me because, as a Taurus, I'm probably going to lean towards playing it safe. And so when I started looking at most of the people, look at Steve Jobs and Oprah, they had no idea how they were going to pull that off, but they weren't going to let not knowing dictate what they would be willing to go for. So I don't know how much time we have, so I can go on some others, but those are a couple of the really significant differences that I saw.
No, those are great. Well, we have a little bit more time, and so I want to make sure that I feel that you feel and that we can let people fly with with the information that we've given them so far, sort of, get them excited about coming back, about using this. And so just to reiterate, I want to go back over it again. The three main things that stop us or that get in the way of earning more money, attracting more money would be fear. And I love that you said that that was about the logic, that logic was really about, how we stop ourselves and how fear manifests itself. Conflict was number two, and about using the word and I added using and instead of but, just as a psychological tool that a lot of therapists use. And then the third one was about the limiting beliefs and that story. And I love that too. I know I heard that years and years and years ago, and it was definitely in a business and marketing workshop or seminar about that we tell ourselves stories and that none of them are true anyway. So if you're going to tell yourself a story, why not tell a different story that makes you feel better and gets you excited? And learning how to think differently was one of the things you said high earners do differently, like they train themselves. So maybe let's go through that one a little bit deeper. And what are some of the tools or resources that you think are the most important when someone is trying to retrain how they think?
Yeah, well, let's just create a formula. Let's just take you through a formula right now, starting with thinking differently. So, if you want to think differently, and you can learn a lot of different things to think differently about, I'll cover more of them at the event in September. But ultimately, whatever is the block, like if it's conflict, if it's a story you've made up, if it's the fear, I want you to write it down, and then you're going to have to flip it. So, if your main story is I'm not good enough, then you're going to have to flip it to I am good enough or I am capable. And that might feel awkward and weird and so untrue. And I want you to be with it and recognize, okay, so if that's not true now, what would have to happen to make it true? So the first thing we have to do is we have to flip our thinking. And if any of the things that high earners do or think differently about, you go, that's not me. I don't believe that, right? So guess what? That's a place to flip it. How could you adapt a piece of that and train yourself to start thinking that way? The reason why people don't do this is it feels wrong or it feels false. And you're like, I'm not going to tell myself something false. Well, that may be true, but what are some actions we could take? And so let's assume that you're flipping whatever negative thought patterns, whatever negative beliefs you have, and we're working on that and it's starting to feel more right. Here's the next step in the formula. The next step is to decide. It's really that simple. You have to decide that the thing you want is more aligned than where you are today. So for me, back when I first left my corporate career and all the safety of my paycheck that I received every 2 weeks, and I went into this big, vast, unknown world of having my own business, I made a decision that I was going to be my own boss. And what was at stake was way bigger than my fears about getting in the way. Like, I don't know how to make money and all that stuff. It's like, okay, I'll figure it out. So you have to decide, what do you want and what's at stake to have it. And then once you make that decision, the next step is to surrender needing to know how. And that may feel completely backwards. It's like, okay, Melanie, I don't get it. Like, I have to know how to do stuff if I'm going to walk through this path. But here's what happens. The minute you decide, all of a sudden, you talked about frequency earlier, JJ. Literally, the frequency of that decision becomes like a compass point, and it actually starts to put you in the resonance of other ideas, of other resources, of other people that are in the frequency of that decision. And you will be amazed at what starts to show up. And so the next step is the power of your questions. Okay, so you've decided, you're all in, you've surrendered the how. Now it's the power of your questions. And this, oh my gosh, I actually have never taught it this way before, but it feels so right for what we're going to create at your event in September. The power of your questions now will dictate whether you succeed or fail at it. And so you want to ask yourself really powerful questions like, what do I have to be willing to do next? What do I have to be willing to stop doing to make room for, the thing that I never have time for? What would I have to be willing to do to cover this investment today because I know it's the right investment to get me where I need to go? So you want to start asking yourself really powerful questions that open up possibility instead of limit you. Give you a couple examples of limiting questions or limiting statements, I might say. I don't know how. We're done, right? There's nothing that your resourceful mind is going to do with that. Well, I don't know how. Okay, good. Let's support that. But when you say, what do I have to be willing to do? What do I need to learn next? Who could help me learn what I need to learn? Those are powerful questions that will help you find the next step. Because here's how our mind works. Our mind, when set on task, will work very, very hard to supply the answer. So if we ask ourselves limiting questions, guess what? It's just going to support the limit. But if you ask yourself empowering questions that open up possibility, our resourceful mind will just start to go to work. It's like, okay, how do I answer this question? Let's find a new answer. Your questions at that stage are really, really going to shape your trajectory. So that's a really simple 4-step process to get you going in the right direction. And then we might even add a 5th step is get support. And that, I think, is the single most pivotal piece of the puzzle, is to recognize that when we try to do things alone, we can only go so far. But when you're in the energy of other people who are using similar decisions and energies and commitments to propel themselves forward, it's a very powerful, very magnetic, very it's like it raises your vibration very quickly. So get to an event like the event JJ's doing in September and then again in January. Get into community, even if it's an online community. Like I have an online Facebook group where it's a community of people who are committed to the same things, and they're there supporting each other and starting to, create connections. Get a coach, go to some community that's near you, a meetup group, whatever it takes. But don't buy into, I have to do this on my own. Like that will only get you so far. I'm really huge on step 5 being get support, get into community, get into a mastermind, whatever it takes.
I create a group for everything I want to do to keep me accountable to doing it, period. Like literally ask me how many groups I'm in, because it gets it done, right? It just gets it done. Otherwise, because you're being, if nothing else, you have to every week or month or however often you do the group, have to say what you did or if you didn't do anything. So just the act of having that expectation, that's because when we talk to ourselves, it's easy to say, oh, I'll do it later. Oh, I'll do it later. But when there's someone else saying, did you do what you said you were going to do? That's just that simple act is enough for me to go, oh my gosh, I have to take action. So I completely agree. And I want you to tell people about how to connect with you, your groups, your online group, which I know is free, and any other way you want to be able to provide them any resources from now until they're going to come to the event. Or maybe they don't, they just want to work with you because they can't come and they know they need you right now. So how can they get in touch with you? What do we have for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, MelanieBenson.com is a great main place to come. And since we're in the conversation of creating money and cash flow, I want to share with you a very short book that I wrote called Rewired for Wealth. And I feel like it's really relevant no matter where you are in your trajectory. So rewiredforwealth.com is the place to get it. It's not on my website right now, so it's that's the secret link, rewiredforwealth.com. And then my group on Facebook is called Amplify Your Success. It's the same as the podcast, just to make it really easy. You're welcome to come join us over there, amplifyyoursuccesscommunity.com, or you can also search for it on Facebook. But, what I would say is feel free to start with the book, read it. It does lead you to some other programs that I teach, but it's basically everything I went through to train my mind, how to move beyond the limitations of the conditioning of my world and my life and everything I'd learned up to that point, and flip things around so that I could create a high 6-figure business. And I follow every single thing I teach. I teach it now to other people because I do believe that our minds are capable of achieving so much more than we probably realize they could, because we've never conditioned our mind for greatness. It probably fell prey to a series of assaults over the years from people who were not sharing a higher vibration, a higher frequency. And yeah, you can shift that. It's just learning what to do to change the way our brains function.
And everyone can benefit from all of it. No matter what level you're at, we can always take it to the next level because we are all here to expand. So, Melanie, thank you so much. This was chock full, which is why I want to keep repeating so people who weren't taking notes, because I'm taking notes, can hear over and over again, and we can start to really anchor in some of these principles so people can become more aware and start shifting now. And then again, yeah, please check out melaniebenson.com and get her book. And come to the September event, meet her live and do the processes with us or buy the virtual ticket. But this conversation has just started. It will continue. She will be back on the show at least one more time, if not more than that. So if you have any questions in the meantime of things you would like Melanie to speak about, please feel free to contact me. If you're in one of my groups, just send me a note or send me a private message and say this is what I want to hear more of, and we're happy to do that for you. So Melanie, thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Thanks for having me on your show. I'm such a huge fan of your work, and it's an honor to be here. And connecting mindset and prosperity and frequency is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Frequency and money. So let's all expand to the point where everyone is abundant in all areas of life.